Now, I would probably be somewhat negligent if I were to neglect offering a functional definition of Tantra as a philosophical tradition and how it relates to the worldview that I'm offering here. Most of us in the West do not have any contact with the essential source material that we might roughly call tantric. I mean, most of us have heard of the Kama Sutra and such, which is a very, very small element of tantric philosophy. And some might not see the obvious connection between, for example, the tantric tradition that comes from Vedic tradition and how it might relate to the thinkings of, say, Pythagoras, Parmenides, Empedocles. Well, here's how I connect the dots. In fact, what you see in Tantra is a perspective that asserts that the sublime can be understood in the mundane, meaning the pathway to transcendent experience is through the common, the physical, and the everyday, meaning that it does not take a retreat to some kind of monastery or some kind of peculiar practice in some temple in the sky to find oneself in possession of some kind of understanding of divinity, but in fact, that which is loosely spoken, spiritually profound can be found in anything, and a tantric approach is to find it absolutely everywhere in the common, in the street. Now, of course, we can see the obvious attraction to tantric works such as the Kama Sutra, for of course it is an easy and available avenue to try to find the profound and the sublime. For certain, if you cannot find connection with the divine in sexuality, then you're not super skilled, let's just say. And for sure, too, in an activity like what has become kind of my life passion and calling, the sailing, it's certainly another activity that lends itself very easily to being a vehicle for teaching those kinds of tantric lessons of finding the profundity in the ordinary. But it's a lot more skillful in exercise to try to, say, fold your laundry in a tantric manner or just make breakfast in a tantric manner. But those would, in fact, be concerns of tantric philosophy as well, because the assumption is, of course, that there is a lesson to be learned in everything, even those things most mundane, about the nature of the universe, and it's an interesting practice to contemplate. The easier avenues by which we can approach that kind of thinking can serve as tools for training us to find pathways and things that where they may not be as immediately apparent. Okay. But again, the point of the whole thing is to find connection, to find gnosis, and that's done through real experience, real connection with other in a non-metaphorical sense. Now, if we add the Greek thinkers into the mix, each of whom I've referenced here had their own esoteric tradition, most of which has been lost to us, but of the formal philosophy that still exists of math and perhaps systematic formic logic. Mathematics, logic, music theory, even aesthetics, studied as a science, were also considered mechanisms by which that which is sublime can be understood from the mundane. And they too, without question, shared the attitude that to learn mathematics, logic, music theory, aesthetics, geometry, and the rest, these were to be seen as a practice, as a means to approach the universe, to try to draw near and form a relationship with reality in what we might today call a spiritual sense, except that there's practically no spiritiness in it. So, for those of you who've listened to my musings for a while over the last few years, you can see why I find this kind of thinking attractive. It certainly dovetails nicely with my view here that the purpose of life is to live a life of purpose, and purpose is found in connection. If we find our seeking of intimacy in the external other, that is something we can do in a complementary state with other people, because we are referencing the same objective reality as a vehicle for our relating. If you and I are on a sailboat together and we have a given experience, that experience is something that we have objectively shared. Obviously, our way of relating it to it is different, but nonetheless, the experience will have some commonality in the abstractions that we might form of it. But on the other hand, if you are taking on meditative traditions where the truths that you understand are somehow revealed to you by some kind of fleeting internal space, well, then you have nothing to share with your fellow peers, because, of course, the wisdom that you are finding, if you find it, is completely unique only to your own experience, and as such not communicable to others, and may actually have an element that remains divisive within it. And of course, I'm not here to completely poo-poo the notion of internal truths. I'm sure that everyone has an internal truth or two that is largely irrational and some kind of product of our own minds and our own character and our own experience. It's wholly internal, inexplicable, and incommunicable. I'm sure we all do. But it's good to keep your mouth closed about it, because, in fact, no one else can or will, or maybe is even interested in trying to understand those things, but because they cannot. On the other hand, if you focus on trying to make your connection with other in the common space of what is real, in activities that exist for more than one person, I think that there is connection that can be found there in an authentic manner that is far beyond the value of what can be found quietly sitting alone and reflecting on your own internal universe. So there you go. There's the very quick Cliff Notes, ultra condensed introduction to Tantra if you were not familiar. It's an interesting view to contemplate, and it's certainly worth a little contemplation. I think it suggests a lot of potential strategies by which one can find a lot of purpose and meaning in life, because, of course, certainly at our disposal are plenty of opportunities by which we can try to relate to that which is external and beyond us, and it is difficult to find any of them, no matter how mundane, that do not carry within them some kind of intrinsic, some kind of inherent message that, if we were willing to embrace this, can go a long way to enrich our own being and our own life, and in fact prove to be a great source of meaning. So I would encourage you to reflect on the possibilities that are contained here, and hopefully you will find something in it that is useful in your own life. Cheers, people.